the solo I wrote in 2015. I did that for DCI, INE. So I can just tell you guys a couple things briefly about solos. They're cool for a couple reasons. It's a chance to show your individuality or like your individual performance in a setting that, this activity is mostly stuff that we play all together as a group, right? So you kind of have to play the music that you're given, you have to play it the way that you're told to sound as good as you can with the whole group, but playing a solo by yourself, you get to just show your individual sound on your instrument, so that's kind of cool. You get to play things on your instrument that you might otherwise not be able to, like there's some things that it might not make sense to get like 9 people to try to play it all together clean, that you can play by yourself really awesome. So that's a cool chance to show a specific skill that you have. And lastly, you can build some confidence and skills in a different setting. It's kind of a lot more pressure on you individually when you're just playing by yourself than when you're playing with a whole group. But you can apply that confidence when you are playing with your group. So it's applicable in that sense. And the same thing, like I mentioned, DCI also has an INE competition. I think tons of different percussion associations have the same kind of competition. So it's great to have an opportunity in your local circuit to get to try to play a solo or play an ensemble piece. You can get some experience if you want to go down the road, play some more percussion in DCI or WGI or at the Percussive Art Society Festival. You could do the solo ensemble competitions then as well if you'd like to. Okay, so I'll share some tips on like choosing a solo or writing a solo if any of you guys choose to do one of those two for your INE. I'd say the first thing you can think about is the purpose or the context. So for those of you doing this competition, that's kind of your purpose. You're doing the competition, you're going to be judged by someone, they're going to give you a score or like feedback. That's different than if you were just learning something to play with your friends, right? So think about that for what it's worth. That might affect what you choose to play, right? If you're just playing with your friends, you might play something way crazier than if you're going to get judged for it. My quick advice for choosing a solo is pick something that suits your skill level and shows off things that you're good at. So I know it's really, really tempting to want to play like the hardest thing you could possibly find or write or that you've ever heard. But that might not necessarily be the thing that suits you as a player, and that's totally okay. And I think a great example of playing something above your skill level, or that's maybe just risky and not worth any kind of reward, like you're not getting anything from it, is a lot of DCI INE solos. If you watch, especially my solos, like there's times where I drop a stick or I mess something up. So if I had just written things a little bit easier, I don't think anyone would have been like, oh, this guy didn't have enough stick flips. But I think it would have come across a little bit stronger. So I would encourage you all to think of that when you're choosing a solo or writing a solo as like, what's really showing my best qualities and like my best playing abilities as well. Okay, so the more fun thing probably for some folks is writing a solo. And if you're these pieces of advice I think are applicable to any kind of drum music that you're interested in writing. It's kind of hard, the first piece of advice I have, but the first thing I think of is to try to build musical ideas, and especially to think melodically. It's really hard because we all play, pretty monotone instruments. If you play the quads, you have like 6 tones, 5 tones. You play a snare drum, you have 1 drum tone, but you can explore different aspects of your instrument. You can try playing on the rims, play some cross drops, rim shots, play on the drum or on your drum stand. You can find different ways to get creative to make it sound more melodic than if you were just playing on the drum the whole time, the same kind of rhythms, same kind of speed, same dynamics. But you can use all those things to your advantage, right? The fact that you may only have 1 pitch sound, but you can utilize dynamics to make things sound more exciting. You can use repetition, different uses of rhythms in different areas that can help make your solo a lot more musical sounding, even if you only have 1 pitch. So the other thing I think of often is just how can I use simple ideas in a novel way. I think everyone can also think of that in a way that you could do that. Just think of like really simple rudiments, like the ones that I utilize often are like singles, paradiddles, flam rudiments. We all probably know those and like some variations on each of those. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you're trying to write something, it can be kind of intimidating. Like you just have a blank sheet of paper and you're like, I have no idea what to write. Just start with something simple. It could literally just be like a melody you think of in your head. It could be a rhythm that you hear in a song that you like, and you could just reinterpret that on your instrument. How do I do that with like rudiments that are kind of customary on my instrument? That might get you something that sounds really new or really unique. So those are some ideas for ways that you could think of that. Yeah, okay, and then the last thing that I think is worth thinking about for solo playing that's not super similar to when we're playing in a group setting is playing with tempo. So when we're playing in a group, we're often playing to a metronome. Probably one movement is like the same tempo the whole time, and the next movement is a new tempo, the next movement is a new tempo. When you're playing by yourself, you have the opportunity to really stretch the tempo. You can get faster, get slower in different areas than are expected, and that can be really interesting in a way that's not super easy when you're playing with a bunch of other people at the same time. So there's a lot of times in my solo where I try to use that. Maybe you caught some of those. Yeah, so just anytime you want a cello or D-cello that can correlate to a different kind of mood that you're trying to convey in your solo playing. The last thing I think, one more thing that I think is really important is just repeating phrases is really important, and that can kind of be a way to convey and elaborate a motif. So at the beginning of my solo, I had that little thing. I just thought of that one day, it wasn't even that important to me what I played there, and I wrote most of my solo before I came up with that, but then one day I was just like messing around on my drum, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of like catchy. So I messed with that. I was like, what can I do with that? Add some rims, and then between different parts of what I was playing, I was trying to add that in different other places as well to kind of come back to a theme. That's a great thing to think about too. So those are all the notes I had. That's everything I think I wanted to just ramble at you guys. But we have like 10 minutes left until awards, so I'd love to answer questions if anyone has any. Yeah, it can be about solo playing, just whatever you all think you would like to get an answer to. Yeah, anybody? Yes. Yeah, okay. My number one, something I think is that it never gets easier. Like you never don't have that feeling of anxiety or like discomfort at like standing in front of a group of people. Like I've had that just now. I had that the very first time I performed that. But the only thing you can really do is get used to it. So that could mean playing in front of like a small group of people. You could just ask your friends or maybe like your parents or your family members, like, hey, can you watch me play this? And that forces you to like kind of have that nervousness of like, oh, now I'm responsible to play in front of people and it has to sound good. So yeah, you never get rid of like the butterflies in your stomach. You just get used to them after doing that over and over and over and over. So yeah, just put yourself in situations where you have to feel that. Anybody else? Yes.
A little off topic, but where did you get those pants from?
I got them, I think, at Buffalo Exchange. Thank
you.
Yes. The tension. Yeah, and I don't think it's too different from other percussion instruments, except as marching percussion instruments, I think especially are in a similar class because they have a similar amount of rebound. Like when you throw the stick against the head, how hard is it going to push back? Right? If you play on a marimba, it's not going to give you so much energy back to you, but marching drums will give you a lot of energy back. So I'm thinking of propelling a lot from my wrist mainly, but I'm utilizing all my muscle groups. I'm trying to use them in conjunction in the best way I can. Like I'm not trying to think of anything too separate. Does that make sense? muscle independence? Oh man, that's a great thing to think about. I think yeah, I think they asked how to work on muscle independence. Is that right? If you haven't heard the term independence before, it just means being able to do one thing with one limb at a time while you're doing something else with a different limb. So that that might sound weird, but it's just like playing rudiments, right? You're doing two different things with each arm. So I think to build that, just having a strong grasp of all the rudiments is a great place to start. And some of them, it's really easy to tell what the independence of each one is. Like if you're playing flam taps, right, you can imagine right, left, left with a flam on both of the first notes of each hand. So if you were to just play with one hand on the drum and one hand on the rim, you would hear that both hands are just playing 3 notes at a time. They're just starting at a different time. So that's something you could do too, is in like your rudimental practice or even practicing show music, you could play with just one hand on the drum. That kind of gives you some sense of, oh, what is one hand doing at a time? And you could even just practice what that pattern is and then put it back together with both hands. Does that answer your questions? Cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
So when you're writing your show, I've never done hockey, but when you're writing it, do you improvise parts of it and write like new phrases, or do you have to write?
Yeah, if anyone didn't hear, they asked when writing solos if I improvise parts of it or if I have to write it all out. I feel like I have to write it all out. I don't feel like I'm good enough as an improviser to perform as well as if it's something I'd written and practiced over and over. I guess that's more for when I was performing, but when I'm writing things, I'll often just improvise and kind of like feel stuff out to see what I like. So that's a great method to, like, if you have no idea what to write, just go up to your drum and play something that feels comfortable, or like play something without thinking about it, and maybe like 3 times out of 10 it'll be like, oh, that's something interesting, like let me write that down and let me try expanding on that. That's something I would do kind of often. Yes. Sorry, could you repeat that? A story? That's a great question. Okay, yeah. I think thinking of your solo as like a story is another great way to kind of conceive of it. And you're telling a musical story, right? So the same way that your drumline show, right? You start with the beginning and probably crescendos up into like a big climax, and then maybe comes down again. Like it has like peaks and valleys, same way as like a book, any other piece of music or piece of art. When you're playing just one tone, I would think of all the other categories that you could manipulate. So like rhythms, like do the rhythms all sound the same the whole time, or can I play some of them faster and some of them slower and create different moods that way? Also think of like different surfaces you could play, right? So on snare drum you can play different zones of the head. You could play on the rim some, you could play on the drum, you could play your sticks. So yeah, just get creative in those ways too. And think of motifs too, like those to me like make it easy to think of like, oh, like this is like the thesis of the solo, or like this is like the topic sentence of this next movement, or something like that. Cool, anybody else? Yeah, the back. That's a great question. I don't think it matters much at all, but stick tricks are fun. So take it for what you will. I don't think anyone has ever lost a solo competition or scored poorly because they didn't have enough stick tricks. Okay, I think probably people have scored poorly because they had too many stick tricks and they weren't focusing on the actual music of what they were playing. So, yeah, in the back. No, it was named after that song, Kendrick Lamar. Yeah. Good song. Yes.
What were the differences when the first time you wrote your first solo and the second time when you wrote your those things?
Yeah, okay. So I wrote, anyone who doesn't know, I wrote 2 snare drum solos that I competed in INE for DCI. The first one I wrote 2015, so that was my second year in Blue Devils, and then my last year that I marched was 2019. I did it again. I think some things that I thought of differently were getting straight to a point. Like if I want to convey this motif or like this mood at this moment, I'm just gonna. The second time around, I was confident enough to just do it, as opposed to like writing some other stuff that like kind of conveys something or like implies something. I think a lot of times we have an intention in our head of like how we mean something to sound when we play it, but it doesn't always come across that way to the audience. And this is another thing. I think for your solo and ensemble competition, you only get to play your piece one time for the judge, right? But you probably play it by yourself hundreds of times, so you know the piece in and out. You know, like, oh, like this leads into this, or like there's like these cool musical ideas in here. But the judge only gets to hear it one time, so I think it's okay to lean on the side of making something obvious. So in my last solo, I think I repeated things a lot, even more than my first solo, just because I wanted it to be very obvious. Like, this is a big idea right here. Like, listen to this one phrase. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, anyone else? And we have just a few more minutes. Yes.
How long have you been playing it for?
How long have I been playing the drums for? I started playing when I was 10 years old, and now I'm 24, so 14 years. I believe. Yes.
How far in advance did you write the solos from the competition?
I started writing my solos maybe the fall before the summer competition, but during the fall and spring I was doing a lot of schoolwork, so I didn't write a ton then. In drum corps, a lot of people will take their summer, take the whole summer to write their piece. It's kind of annoying because the only time that you have to do that is like meal breaks and like on your free time. So I tried to get ahead of that. But I would say it probably took maybe like 3 months total if you were to do it like every day for like an hour or something. Maybe about that much. But people can write in different ways. Like maybe you get spurts of energy and you want to write a bunch of stuff in like 1 week. That's cool. Like sometimes that happens, and sometimes it's awesome writing stuff. But if you haven't written anything yet for your solo, and you feel like that would be a lot of pressure for you, that's okay. Like you don't have to write a whole marvelous piece of music in 2 weeks. That's kind of a lot to ask of yourself. So, yeah. Anyone else? I think we have time for maybe one more. Yeah.
What's like the time limit for a solo? Like how long does that take?
I don't know. Well, I can tell you in DCI it was like 3 minutes to 4.5, 2.5 minutes to 4 minutes. I would look on the NCPA website. They might have rules for INE. Anybody else? I think we have time for just one more. Yes. Who are some of my biggest inspirations when I write music? Oh man, I watched a lot of snare drum solos and quad solos too. So I would recommend that to anyone who's interested in writing a solo. There's tons of videos of people doing DCI, INE, or like some other situation where they're doing like a solo snare drum piece or a solo quad piece, or even like a small ensemble of different instruments. But you can get so many ideas. There's they've done it since the 70s, and there's been a couple dozen people who compete every year. So that's like hundreds and hundreds of solos that you can pull ideas from. So I would encourage you all to look through those and find ideas. It doesn't even have to be on your instrument. Like I would watch a lot of quad videos, and those would give me like quads are like super melodic sounding. And I was like, oh, how can I apply that to snare drum? Do we have time for any more, or should we move on? One more? We got time for one more. Yes. I'm a Scorpio. I don't know if that's okay. I guess that's all my time. Thanks so much for sticking around. It was really fun to watch you all. I think Mark and Evan, they sent me a couple of drumsticks to use, and they gave me a bunch of lanyards to give out. So if anyone wants a lanyard, you can come find me. I'll have it somewhere.